Let him speak. The Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, which helped organize the vigil or rally, issued an apology that itself got political. Quote, "We are deeply sorry any part of this vigil did not provide the support, caring, and sense of community we sought to foster and facilitate, and which we know is so crucial to communities who suffer the trauma of gun violence." Some students were finally allowed to speak. One said, quote, "We cannot be used for gun control. We are people, not a statement." Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thanks a lot for that. Well, as you heard, it wasn't just gun control activists who came to Colorado to push an agenda after the tragedy. The politicians, of course, were there. They were drawn to the scene, as they always are. Congressman Jason Crow and Senator Michael Bennet, both Democrats, attended the prayer vigil. They weren't there to offer prayers. They were there to belittle prayer and instead hold a campaign rally. Here's part of it.
You already have my thoughts and prayers, but you deserve and should demand more. Because to only send thoughts and prayers when you're a member of Congress or when you're in a position to take action and to effect change, it is empty, it is hollow, and you and your children deserve more.
Our kids already have enough to do. Their job is not to fix America's broken gun law.
Though not addressed. In the past decade, teen depression has risen dramatically, as have teen suicides. They're connected, of course. Between 2008 and 2017, the percentage of adolescents with depression symptoms rose 52%. Among kids 15 to 24, suicides are up almost 50%. That's a horrifying number. No one mentions it. Millions of American children are on drugs for ADHD, anxiety, other mental health problems. But why? What is driving this? Is it the breakdown of the family? Is it too much screen time? Is it something in the food? We don't really know. That's the actual tragedy. And as long as our leaders' preferred response to this tragedy is opportunism, we never will know. Jason Nichols is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
So I'm not interested in having another gun control debate. I want to have a sincere conversation about this and bless those kids to at least raise a deeper question than gun confiscation. That's a question of mental health. Why don't we have a national conversation?
And it's, you know, it's troubling to me. I think we do need health care. We do need to have a conversation about mental.
Well, I agree, but here's what and maybe we need a conversation. You know, I'm open-minded. Here's what I object to. I object to the vultures, the politicians, swooping in immediately and using other people's pain to gin up votes, using kids to do that. So Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who's a senator, really one of the most shameless members and dumbest of the Senate, said this, quote, "You cannot accept the premise that there is any waiting period after a tragedy to start engaging in political action." So if you don't pause at all between a tragedy and calling for some new law, it's not even possible to have a conversation if you behave that way, is it?
I agree. I will say this. I believe that these kids needed an opportunity to grieve.
Yeah.
They needed an opportunity to, you know, talk about their friend who gave his life, Kendrick Castillo. That's something that needed to happen before you even talk necessarily about causation, which includes mental health.
Well, I agree.
You know, people were screaming mental health. Other people were screaming gun control. They needed a moment to just grieve.
That's a totally fair point.
The Castillo family didn't need to hear any of that.
That's a totally fair point. And it's always these adults who swoop in with an agenda, weaponizing the kids, you know, kids who are in pain. And they say to the kids, your pain would go away if you would just climb aboard my pet issue. And why don't we say to those adults, back off, creep. You should not be allowed to do this to children.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are times when students, you know, after they've had their opportunity to grieve, they start being active in their communities. The Parkland kids, they had their ideas about how to make their community safer. And I praise them because they took action on what they thought was right. I do think that you do need at least a little.
Shouldn't be belittling prayer, which is totally real, and its effects are real, I could just say. Really quick, I can't resist asking, since you are a professor of African American Studies, there are a lot of kids getting killed in this country all the time. and they get no publicity at all. Not Chicago, I guess, gets a lot of attention, but pick a city. Bridgeport, Hartford, since we got Senator Murphy on the screen, New Orleans. Pick a place where you have poor people. Often it's an African-American neighborhood, and kids are getting killed. Politicians almost never show up and give speeches when that happens. Why is that?
Well, again, and this is probably going to anger your audience, but I don't really care about that. But I will say that's because in many people's imagination, black lives do not hold the same value.
But what about, but apparently that's right. So where's Eric Swalwell? Where's Chris Murphy? Where are the people you just saw? Where's Senator Bennett? Where are they?
I agree. They need to be there. And that's not to say that no politicians show up. I know local politicians throughout, my area who show up when there's a tragedy. But at the same time, then let me just say, then Black Lives Matter should not be a controversial statement. That's
never been a controversial statement
Great.
for me. All lives matter. That shouldn't be controversial either, because
but that's a retort. That's the problem.
It's not a retort. It's an observation. Yeah. God created all people, and they have equal value before Him. Period.
Yeah. But obviously not in the eyes of people in power in our politics.
Yeah. I mean, so where is Senator Bennett? We should call him and ask.
Yeah.
Professor, great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. The Mueller report ended the Russia collusion conspiracy. Why haven't Republicans in the Senate gotten the memo? Where's Mitch McConnell on that question? Laura Trump joins. Well, if you ask most American media executives what they do in their free time, if they're being honest, they'll tell you they go to award ceremonies and accept meaningless awards on their own behalf. Awards calling themselves free speech heroes, defenders of the First Amendment, right? What they really should be getting is public relations awards, because most of the time that's what they are, dedicated PR servants to the DNC, repeating the talking points faithfully and verbatim. You've seen it day after day. Some Democrat says, for example, that illegal immigrants are actually undocumented. And within a couple of days, that's the only acceptable word in the media. Well, this week, they have a brand new talking point. We like to keep track of this because it's amusing and also helpful if you're watching at home. The DNC is mad at the president. So according to the press, we have a constitutional crisis. Watch.
We've talked for a long time about approaching a constitutional crisis. We are now in it. We are now in a constitutional crisis.
I do believe we have now entered that constitutional crisis.
A full-scale assault on Congress means to instigate a kind of constitutional crisis.
We are facing a constitutional crisis.
I'm really curious, because isn't that the height of isn't that the definition of a constitutional crisis?
President Trump appears to be heading toward a constitutional crisis with House Democrats as he continues to hide the Mueller report.
President Trump is pursuing a Stonewall strategy when it comes to Congress and courting a constitutional crisis.
This administration wants to have a constitutional crisis because they do not respect the oath of office that they take.
So, ever wonder what a constitutional crisis looks like? Well, open your eyes.
Don Lemon's always the last to know, but the most excited to know. Good job, everybody. Definitely enough to justify another round of free speech awards next year. Well, the Russia collusion conspiracy is dead, courtesy of Robert Mueller, but like a zombie, it keeps moving forward, drawing all of Washington's attention. On both sides, by the way, it's not just Democrats who are involved in keeping this hoax alive. The Senate Intelligence Committee, which is led by a Republican, Richard Burr of North Carolina, has sent a subpoena to Donald Trump Jr. Now, Trump Jr. has already testified before the committee once last year at great length. What is the point of this? A lot's going on in Washington, and yet the hoax continues in the U.S. Senate. Laura Trump is Donald Trump Jr.'s sister-in-law. She's a senior advisor to President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, and she joins us tonight. Laura Trump, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you. Great to be with you. My first time on your show.
Yeah, and we're happy you're here. This is a genuinely baffling story, I would say. So this afternoon, Richard Blumenthal, the senator from Connecticut, said that if your brother-in-law doesn't comply with the subpoena and come and testify before the committee, quote, he ought to be put in jail. Prison is the only answer. What is going on here, do you think?
Well, it's really confusing, I think, to a lot of people, because to the point you just made, this is over. The Mueller report is complete. We know that what it was started to do to show whether or not the Trump campaign and the president colluded with Russia has been solved. We know that did not happen.
Right.
Whatever they think they're going to do is not going to change that. It's not going to make Hillary Clinton the president of the United States, like I know they all wanted so badly for so long. Unfortunately, this is just more of the same, Tucker. This is harassment of our family, harassment of the president. And it's a shame because the American people send these folks in Congress to Washington, D.C. to make great changes in our country and to do things that they want to see happen. They're doing nothing. What is this doing for our country? It's nonsense. They need to focus on things Americans care about. Nobody cares about this. It's over. It's dead.
I think that's a fair summation. I mean, I think you're factually correct. And by the way, I believe that your brother-in-law has offered to respond to any questions the committee has in writing, but they're demanding he come in person, which kind of underscores the point you made. Here's the confusing part. The Senate is controlled by Republicans. Mitch McConnell is the Senate Majority Leader. He appointed Senator Burr to head this committee. So it's really a question of Mitch McConnell. Like, why would he allow this, do you think?
Well, that's very confusing. It seems like he's pretty upset by this. And as a native North Carolinian, I am shocked and appalled that somebody from a Republican from my home state would do something as crazy as this. I'm not sure what the strategy is here. Don has gone in and testified for dozens of hours and